comments and opinions expressed on Writers in Focus are those of the individual participants and are presented for the purpose of discussion only. No endorsements by Atlanta Fulton Public Library System or Fulton County government are intended, and none should be presumed. Hi, welcome to Writers in Focus. I'm your host, James Taylor, and today I'm delighted to have as my guest Imani. May I call you Imani?
You may.
That means faith in Swahili?
Yes.
Off to a good start. By way of introduction, you are a world traveler. You work as a life coach. You're an attorney. And you're the author of one of the most remarkable first novels I've read in a long time. We're going to talk about When I Was Broken. I'd like to welcome you to the Atlanta Fulton Public Library and the Fulton County Government Center. I'm just going to set you up, and I want you to start talking. But here's
Okay.
my setup, okay? I read a lot of bad fiction. Books come my way, and oh God, the author wants me to say how good it is, how bad it is. I was so delighted by reading this book, and it's a page turner, it's entertaining, it's enlightening, and I'm going to set you up by saying that there's an old Latin expression, amor vincit omnia, love conquers all. In this book, love does not conquer all. Who are Marcus? Who's Angela?
Well, thank you so much for having me. And
It's
I'm
my pleasure.
humbled by your comments.
It's my pleasure.
When I Was Broken is inspired by my own true story. And Angela and Marcus are your everyday couple, except they're not.
Okay.
Angela is a practicing attorney. She's been married to Marcus, the love of her life, for 5 years. They think they might be expecting a baby. And
They're in their late 20s.
They're in their late 20s.
Angela works at, we can say, the 191 beautiful skyscraper
It's
here in
right-
downtown Atlanta.
Right here in Atlanta,
okay.
yes.
And he's a computer whiz, and he's got an MBA, and everything is beautiful.
Everything is beautiful until it's not.
And then I'm looking at my notes, and Angela says to herself one day, something is wrong here.
Something was definitely wrong.
Talk about
Yes.
that for a minute. Like, what I have in mind is, like, what could go wrong with a life so perfect?
Yeah. So the back of the book doesn't give it away, but I'll give it away to the readers today.
Oh, yeah.
In that one dreadful day, Marcus comes to Angela's job, and he's acting paranoid. He is accusing her of all sorts of things and not sure who's out to get him, and she realizes that something has gone wrong and that there's a mental health issue eventually is what emerges. But of course, like most of us, we don't want to accept when things like that are going on, and so it takes her a while to come to terms with what's happening.
You know, I have friends who are psychiatrists and psychologists, and people come into their office and they say, "Doctor, I'm hearing voices. Something's the matter with me,"
Right.
and they feel relieved when they're told it's a tumor or something physiological, something empirical.
Right.
But with Marcus, and you can go to your wonderful website, by the way, www.byimani.com.
byimani.com.
And just Google Imani, and you're there. What I loved about the novel and what makes it so unnerving is that you describe mental illness in a way that very few novels do. I'll give you an example. Angela thinks that something's wrong with Marcus. She loves Marcus, and so it must be his bad childhood. It must be this. Other novelists would say, oh yeah, overbearing mother, no father, being African American really has nothing to do with it. But you never. We don't know why he's crazy. And now wait a second.
Yeah.
And I want to look at the audience right now. When I say crazy, I say that as a layman. We're talking about a mental illness, and we should be respectful. But what's it like? I mean, I can tell you what my story is.
Yeah.
I mean, it's.
Well, I think one of the challenges is that we always want there to be a specific cause that we can point to, and there isn't always. I think the other challenge is that oftentimes we see people, for instance, who are on the street corner talking to themselves, and we never really think about the fact that they had a life before, and that they were completely, and I'll use the term normal, but I don't mean it in a disrespectful way, but one day, and then something shifted. sometimes it's easy to point to the things that went into the mental health breakdown, as we call it in layman's terms, but sometimes it's not. And I think that what I loved about writing this book and why I was so inspired to write it is because I hadn't seen a story about what it's like to love a beautiful mind.
Right.
Instead, you get some stories about, from the inside, but actually watching someone change before your eyes and not being able to do anything about it and feeling that helplessness that comes from wanting to make things right, especially when you, like Angela, have a perfectionism complex.
Sure.
So it was difficult in real life, and I think that one of the things that readers have resonated with is being on this journey with Angela as she tries to hold things together.
It's a super journey. And in my own particular story, I told you before the interview about this friend of mine, an attorney, suspended from the bar, losing the house, car repossessed, hitting the streets, and then I felt like shaking this wonderful woman and saying, "Don't you realize what you're doing to yourself?"
Right.
And she said, I'm okay. The voices in my head, whatever, that's none of your business. Mental illness is a strange thing to talk about, isn't it?
Yeah, and there's something that kicks in that makes the person who's going through the challenge say that there's nothing wrong. And so the difficulty is convincing them that they need some help and finding that right time and that right person to break through. And sometimes it's not so easy. So
I love the pacing of the novel too, Imani. In the beginning of the novel, they're living in a beautiful place. Mm-hmm. Angela says, "Marcus, there's something wrong with you." He kind of knows there's something wrong with him. He's still at that level where I'm hearing voices and it's not coming from the other room. It's coming from my head. Right. So what do? She takes this driving a giant SUV down to the south side off of I-20. And this is in the book. It's very well written. Yeah. Veer off the exit, find one of these mental health clinics that's advertised on TV, practically, and doctor says, counselor first, always a counselor first. And then the doctor says, we might have to keep this man overnight. And everything is okay. I'm not giving too much away, am I?
No.
Okay.
No.
I'm not you. I want you to tell me.
Yeah, no. This is perfect. And I mean, I will tell you, in the real life story, in my real life story, there were a lot of challenges even to getting to a mental health hospital, because when things like that happen, who's prepared for it? Who knows what to do? And we went first to an emergency room where they looked at us and said, I don't know, maybe take them to a charter type facility.
I've got to interrupt right now. One of the great things about the book is that when Angela realizes that she's played out all her cards, this man needs help. Mm-hmm. That's when you pick up the phone and say, he needs to talk to someone now. And the first reaction you get over the phone is, we have an opening next Tuesday morning at 10. No, that's true, isn't it? Yeah,
well, actually, that was Angela's character in the book, making the call.
Okay.
But same storyline, which is I think we all come to a critical point. And for Angela in this story, it got to the point of where trying to hold things together in her marriage and for her husband actually started to create issues within herself. So she was depressed and she was having issues. As often as caretakers, we put the other person's needs first. And it takes something catastrophic to make us say, hey, I've got to actually, as Will and Jada Pinkett always say, put on my life vest first. So mental health is just one of those things that no one thinks they're going to encounter until you do, but it's really like any other ailment or deficiency. So I'm not sure why we treat it like the culprit or something. I don't know. It's like you can say I'm diabetic, but
that's
saying
treatable.
that I have a mental health issue somehow is taboo in our society.
You can walk down Peachtree Street right now and see people who are talking to themselves. It might be 30 degrees outside and they're wearing a T-shirt. It might be, vice versa. It's one of those things that I have trouble understanding, and this is one of the better novels I've read where it's addressed, but at the same time, it's really well written. There's pacing. Could you talk about? Angela has some wonderful friends. The girls.
Friends. Yeah, and as I said earlier, it's inspired by my true story, and so the friends in the book are indicative of a lot of people who were very supportive during that period in my own life. But Angela's friends, India and Christine, are the two main characters here. India, very strong-spirited, take no nonsense, let's move out today. Christine, the more, let's stay here and try to work through this. And what you see, I think, is a real life example of how friends come and support you through those rough times, and you never know when you're going to need it, but when you do, knowing that you have that support system is always there. It's always great, and Angela definitely has a great support system.
Let's leave the narrative for a minute, and
Okay.
I'd like to talk about you.
Sure.
I've read your blog, and you've got a wonderful website. Is it
Thank you.
really true that you have a journalism degree from University of Texas,
I
Austin,
do.
and you have a law degree from Howard, and you said at one point in your life, I'd love to write a novel, I just don't know what to write about. And this came.
Famous last words.
And this came to you?
Yes. Yes.
Could you tell the audience about how it came to you? Or?
Sure. It was about 13 years ago. Everybody has different views on dreams and visions
Yeah,
from
yeah,
God and
yeah.
things like that. But my experience was I wanted to write, but I just had nothing to write about. I would sit down and write these boring stories that I didn't think anybody would really want to read. And I was young. I didn't have a lot of life experience at that point in time. But before I went to sleep one night, I actually asked God to show me in a dream what I should write about. And in my dream, it was as if people were talking from a script. They were actually holding pages in their hand and saying, "Hi, how are you?" And, when I woke up, I wrote in my journal, "My life is a script." And it was great because I knew I was supposed to write about my life, but horrible and good, that
Yeah.
nothing of any magnitude had happened to me that I thought would make for a good story. And then a few weeks later, I got my story. So they say, be careful what you pray for. But
Yeah.
I'm grateful for my own life experiences and for being able to share with people my story, not only this story, but my highs and my lows, because I don't think we talk enough.
Right,
My
right.
mantra, as you saw on my website, is "You are not alone." And so my personal mission is to encourage people to have those transparent conversations, or at least listen to my, transparent conversations, so that they know not only are they not alone in whatever they're experiencing, but that they can make it through those challenges and triumph.
The plot is incredible, too. It works as a good story, as a good novel. I'd like to talk about at least two aspects of Marcus's journey and Angela's, call it, redemption. Angela, of course, calls up Marcus's family. They're no help.
Right.
The medical establishment, they do the best they can, but, and I know this from memory, it's on page 153. Marcus has told Angela that, listen, I promised you I would take medication for 6 months and seek counseling, but I've decided not to. Are you hearing voices? Yes, the voices have come back, but with faith in God and the church, I can be okay. Angela goes crazy herself. That's another great thing about the novel. She's having a little breakdown herself, but
She is.
a neurotic breakdown of Psychology 101. She's not psychotic.
Right.
He is. So the doctor says, if he doesn't want to help himself, it's like an alcoholic, like you have to hit bottom. I'm telling you too much, but it's your book.
Yeah, go on.
But I love that section where where Angela says, Angela's talking to the doctor, and she says, "So you're telling me that my husband has the right to be crazy?" That's a line from a great movie,
I hope it will be one day.
Yeah. Did that happen to you?
That happened
No,
to
okay,
me.
it's none of my business.
No,
But
no,
you
no.
wrote the book. Okay.
It happened to me, and as you know, as from the experiences that you've gone through, we as a society have taken the stance that we will not force medication or treatment on someone unless they are a danger to themselves or a danger to someone else. I understand the reasons for it, but it's really hard when you're watching someone and you think
And
to
you love
yourself,
them. And you love them.
yeah, and you think to yourself, would they choose this for themselves
Right.
if they were able to make a choice? And, as a wife, I think, you think, no, I don't think my husband would choose this. If we can just, get him medicated for long enough to have a coherent dialogue, perhaps we can make a difference. And unfortunately, we can't oftentimes do that unless or until there's a danger, which you don't want there to be. So
We've talked about Angela consulting with her friends who are very helpful.
yeah,
Marcus's family, not so helpful. The medical establishment, who are as helpful as they possibly can be. I mean,
Right.
if I were a psychologist or a psychiatrist, and I read this book, I'd say we did a pretty good job. We did all we could.
right.
But I love, and here's, I don't like to talk about religion that much, but both Angela and
Know where you're
Marcus are regular churchgoers.
Yes.
So Marcus has this idea, wait a second, I still hear voices in my head, I'm acting irrationally, but my religion teaches me that by faith all things are possible.
Right.
And so I'll let you describe the scene. I love it. So Angela says, okay, we'll go to our church. It's a mega church. And this Pastor Murray is a wonderful woman preacher, and she'll help us. And then Pastor Murray's too busy to see them because she's a big pastor of a big church. Could you describe that scene for a minute? I love that.
Yeah. So Angela,
very powerful.
Angela's at her wit's end, and she, at a certain point, has to decide. If I can't beat him working against him, how can I get inside his head and do something that makes sense to him? Church makes sense to him. God makes sense to him. So why don't I get the pastor involved in trying to assist? Unfortunately, I love our churches, love small and large. But it can be difficult when you are in a large church to get to the pastor, which in this instance was the only person that Marcus would respect and listen to. And so in one of the chapters, I tell the story of Angela's plight to try to just get a meeting with the pastor, and then even difficulties during that conversation and trying to get the pastor to understand, I need you to say, take the medicine,
right.
And those clues weren't coming through strong enough. But it's difficult because people want to be supportive, they want to help, but they don't know how. And so in this story, we see a lot of people who are doing what they can to try to help, from the family to the medical community to the church, but no one quite getting there. So it's very frustrating, and I think that's what leads to Angela's mini breakdown, I'll call it.
Yeah, because that's how we can say this, that's how the novel begins. The police show up in their apartment, and Marcus, who is the schizophrenic, says, my wife is having a problem.
Right.
And she's in the fetal position, crying, and the policeman thinks that, of
the two of you.
Of the two of them, I guess, the policeman kind of nods at the husband and saying, boy, you got it rough. These crazy women, you're married to one.
Right.
Unbelievable. There's so much to talk about here. Marcus and medication. I told you about my story about my poor lawyer who disintegrated. I even had to look up Ativan. It's a benzodiazepine. And I remember when my friend was told to take this, the next time I saw her, she was a different person. And that's in the book too a little bit. Like Marcus is fine, but you don't ever say why, but why did Marcus stop taking the medication? Because
he wasn't crazy, in his words.
Okay.
Because he didn't need it. Because he was
You just stopped me in my tracks. That's narrative tension right there. Right.
Yeah, I don't think Marcus ever really brought into the notion that there was something wrong. I think that when the book opens, we see him at such a critical point where he's like, okay, I'll do anything to feel better. He takes the medicine, he starts to get a grip on things, and then thinks, hey, I'm stronger than this. So it's like if you think about a person with a drug addiction, for instance, who thinks, I can take a little of this and be okay, and you really can't. So it's not quite a great analogy, but it's the same notion of someone thinking that they can beat that thing that is sometimes unbeatable. And I don't want to say that no one's capable of healing in other ways, because I don't believe that either. But in this instance, Marcus's path to healing just wasn't working without medication. So it was what Angela was really pushing
for. And that's another theme in the book. It's one thing to talk about people. I'm a librarian. I see people who I'm told to say have behavioral problems, if you know what I mean. And you see that in your profession. We see them on the streets. We see them at restaurants, bus stations, any public area. You will see someone who might have an issue with proper normative behavior.
Right.
What if you love that person? See, that's what drove me crazy with my friend. It's like my wife recalls me saying, what am I going to do? I don't know what to do. And I would grab this person, like not physically, but just say, I'll do anything to help you. I could feel like crying right now, but I'm not. Yeah. But that happened to you, didn't it?
It did.
That really hurts, because the person that you married or that you love as a friend is no longer inhabiting, the soul is no longer there.
Right.
as the ancient
Right.
Greeks would say.
Yeah, I always tell people that.
Boy, I'm on my soapbox, excuse me.
No, I tell people that what I went through personally was harder than a death. And by no means am I belittling.
I love what you're
but
saying.
When you lose someone to death and they're gone, you have to accept it at some point. It's hard. I'm grieving now the loss
Right,
of my
right.
mother. I know that process takes time. But when you actually can still look at and physically touch the person who's no longer with you, it's a whole different beast. How do you wrap your mind around the fact that that person, as you know them, is no longer there? And so Angela, in the fictional story, she is just convinced that she can do something, somehow, to bring back the person she loves because she can still see them.
Right.
And so that's really difficult. In publishing this book, one of the things that has been so eye-opening for me is just how many people have similar stories. You know, maybe I was living in a bubble before, but I don't think I really knew the magnitude of this story and how many people were touched by mental health issues before writing it and getting feedback from folks. But I also want to just say, it's not just a story for people who have experienced or are curious about mental health issues.
Right.
A lot of the comments that I've gotten have been from women in particular who know what it's like to have love take an unexpected turn and have to figure out how to recalibrate. And so at its core, above and beyond everything else, When I Was Broken is a love story.
Sure. I'm thinking out loud to myself, but
Yeah.
not only just Sigmund Freud, but many modern day neurophysiologists and people who study the mind say that, of course, we're all crazy. To use old words,
Right.
we're all neurotic in some
Right.
ways. But the idea is like we want to get your psychosis back to everyday neurosis. I mean,
Right.
Marcus is psychotic, which means he has become unhinged. You got me on my soapbox. Because one thing I got from this book is how fragile our consciousness is, how fragile our everyday life is, and you bring that out.
Yeah. I talked to a few psychiatrists around this period in my real life story, and then again as I was doing the book, just to make sure that the story was consistent with what psychiatrists
Yeah.
and psychologists think. And one of the things that I was told was that there's basically a continuum of behavior, and we consider this segment of it to be normal. And then if you step on either side of it, you know, there's this thinking that maybe something should be done. The problem is that science and medicine, I don't think, have figured out why some people, when placed under the same exact stressors,
Right.
will fall off that continuum and others won't. And so it's a mystery and it's difficult, and I think it would be easier if there were some concrete answers. If we could say it's because this happened or that happened, and if only we, could change this, then we could bring back the person that we know and love. But it, unfortunately, is not that simple.
Yeah, as I get older, I reflect back on the behaviors of even my family and relatives and friends, and like maybe someone was really crazy,
Yeah,
again.
yeah.
But we don't talk about it.
Yeah, we don't.
We're gonna finish up talking about the book in a second, but
Okay.
how about yourself? When I go to your website, there's so much joy. I mean, you're like what they call a spiritual viator, a spiritual traveler.
Thank you.
There's you with your beautiful grin in Bali, for crying out loud.
Bali was awesome. Yeah, in Peru.
Tell me about where you were born and raised, and how you got to be from
Sure.
point A to this world traveler and wonderful novelist.
I'm
In
from,
1 minute. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
yeah, just give me a hand if I'm going too long. But I'm originally from Houston, Texas.
Okay.
I've been in Atlanta for the past, 16 or 17 years, practicing law. And at some point, several years ago, I had a lot going on. My mom was critically ill, suffering from an illness for several years, from Parkinson's disease. And I was working at a law firm that was really, really stressful. And I discovered that decided that I had to start prioritizing myself
Yeah.
and taking
Yeah.
some mini retreats to, keep my own sanity. And so for me, that traveling has just been the absolute best thing that ever could have happened to me. So I started off several years ago with a trip to Aruba, a 48-hour solo trip to Aruba to
Nice.
kind of recharge. And it was where I mentioned my spirituality a little bit before, but to me, the beach is like church to me.
Yeah.
It's where I feel God most. And so being on the beach of Aruba is where I made peace with what was going on with my mom at the time. And since that time, I've just traveled to so many different places, and in it, met so many interesting people, and just Peru, Brazil, Bali, Singapore, some of the longer distances I've gone. But more oftentimes I'm traveling to international beaches, Aruba, the Dominican, Turks and Caicos, you name it. If there's blue water, I'm trying to be there. So.
Well, I'm a married man, but I'll risk it all. Take me with you. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Listen, ladies and gentlemen, I've been talking to Imani, the author of When I Was Broke, and one of the best first novels I've read in a long time. Last question is, are you going to write another novel? Please, please, please.
I am, and I have. I just have to get back into creative mode to finish it. So my next novel is called Bittersweet.
Continue being a wonderful attorney, continue being a spiritual traveler and guide, continue being beautiful, continue writing. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, and that was... Comments and opinions expressed on Writers in Focus are those of the individual participants and are presented for the purpose of discussion only. No endorsements by Atlanta Fulton Public Library System or Fulton County government are intended, and none should be presumed.